I've been photographing with Leica cameras for the last 12 years or so, and over that time period, I've used countless amounts of lenses. I reviewed plenty of them on this channel. Everything from cheap lenses under $200 to the most expensive $10,000+ Noctilux lenses from Leica. But having all of that information, which lenses do I actually have in my professional kit and use on a daily basis? Let's talk about it. So right off the bat, if you've followed my channel, you know that I started with a Leica M9. I moved to an M240, and I actually had two M240s. They were my primary photography tool for a few years. Then I moved to two M10s, used that setup for a couple years, and then have made a few videos now on the Leica M11 and why I switched over to this specifically. So I will say that my kit has changed in that for most of the time that I've been shooting with Leicas, I've actually had two Leica M digital rangefinder cameras. And it's only been in the past few years since the M11's been out and since I've actually purchased one that I've actually pared all of my Leica digital stuff down to one singular camera. Now, I've had multiple other Leica film cameras in the past, but probably on my list of like never sell film cameras is the Leica M6. Part of the reason is this is the classic model, and it's actually, as far as I know from the serial number, from the year I was born. So kind of a fun little bit there. I also picked this up for ridiculously cheap back before things absolutely skyrocketed. So I'm actually not even going to tell you, but you know, leave a guess in the comments of what you think a ridiculously cheap M6 would be, and it will be interesting to hear what you think. Now, I'll say that the lenses that I have on here right now, obviously, any of the lenses, they're a Leica M mount, can fit on any of these cameras. But with the M6 specifically, if I'm shooting a bunch of other things with it, oftentimes what I'm liking to do is bring the smallest lens possible and just make this particular kit really small. So for a long time, I've been using the Summicron C, the 40mm here. It's one of the only lenses that I have bought and then sold and then bought again. But I just love how small it is. I love, like, 40mm is just like a good kind of everyday focal length, you know? So instead of buying like a Leica Q343, I just was like, well, yeah, I have this 40mm, kind of rock with that. And the way that I often go about things is if I'm going to do like a wedding or something like that, I'll shoot maybe a roll or two on this if it's not going to be my primary thing to shoot film. But that way I have a set of images throughout the day, sort of at anchor points to kind of help me go, all right, cool, this is what Portra or another Kodak film saw that day, and here's how I can kind of shift my digital stuff to look a little bit more similar to that. So the other lens that I have with the M6 is this new Mandler lens. I'm sure I've already put out the video on the Mandler lens. It's the 35 f2. It's got some wicked field curvature, but up close when you're doing, like, you know, if I'm taking a photo of the camera right now, this would actually be a really good kind of focal length and distance for that. Big fan of these kind of smaller lenses. Obviously, there's been plenty of times where I've maybe only even brought one set of my more pro kit and, you know, toss the 35 Summilux on here or whatever. But oftentimes, if I'm just going to bring one camera just to go out for personal stuff, these are kind of the lenses that I will use for either of these, and especially on the M6. Now, I want to take a quick second to thank today's sponsor, Aftershoot, for sponsoring this video. Editing my photos is honestly one of the most time-consuming parts of this entire job. And especially the culling of thousands of photos is the thing that I used to dread the most. If you're like me, you come back from a wedding with a few thousand photos to go through. And before you even touch Lightroom, you've got to cull everything. Duplicates, missed focus, blinking, and then it feels like half of the hours in your life are gone. But for the past few years, I've been using Aftershoot to actually handle that first full half of my workflow. Aftershoot will go through everything and basically give me an entire first pass. It'll group duplicates, flag blurry photos, catch closed eyes, and then rank my best images based on a ton of different factors. So for weddings, I will do my full cull through Aftershoot and then have it actually edit those images for me. So the first time I jump into Lightroom Classic, things are already at an incredible baseline. And the cool thing is that these are made from my own edits and my own presets. They're not just a random bit of editing. So as an artist who really cares about my work, this isn't an AI that's replacing me at all. It's just doing a lot of that front and back end work for me, which leaves me with all the creative processes to make my images look how I want them. So if you're editing in any type of volume at all, check it out. It's been a huge time saver for me. And even my last Death Valley video, I let it cull and edit everything for me. I just made minor adjustments, and that's usually how it works for me. So if you're like me at all, check out the QR code up here or the link in the description down below for a free trial. And I honestly think you'll be pretty impressed with the process, the amount of time it's going to save you, and the end result of actually having your work look like your work despite another program kind of helping you edit them. So again, a huge thanks to Aftershoot for both making a great product and supporting the channel. All right, so we've talked about the lenses that I use on the M6 a lot, and kind of as like my personal lenses that I'm going to use if I'm just going out with the family or wanting to take photos. Like I brought these to baseball games lately, things like that. But in my pro kit, I have a little bit of a different, more pro look here, I guess, in a way. And one of the things I'll say is, again, I got my first Leica, I think in 2014. So that was, again, 12 years ago. I've been using the Leica cameras for a long time, and I definitely built up to having multiple actual Leica lenses. None of these are actually the current model. They're both the spherical models that are one step below the current models of the close focus lenses, something that I don't necessarily care about because I'm using these for the rangefinder specifically. But I've probably owned 15 different 35mm lenses over the years, and then finally was able to kind of just keep going in my kit to get the Summilux. So I'm not one of those people that thinks the only lens you should put on a Leica camera is a Leica lens. I think that's silly. I just think that's a terrible, terrible idea. And it doesn't allow people to get into the system when they probably would want to. Most people can't afford to buy a Leica camera and a Leica lens at the same time if they're buying like a modern digital one. So totally fine to buy a Thypoch or a Voigtländer or even an older Summicron. I don't know. There's just tons of options out there. Buy this little Mandler lens for $350. My advice is to pick the focal lengths that you will use the most. Pick the ones that are your like, those are your focal lengths. You will use them the majority of the time, and spend the money to get the better lenses there. So you'll see that on the far ends of my Leica kit, I'm actually using Thypoch lenses, not just because I made reviews on them and stuff, but because that is where I would put money at this current moment in time for those focal lengths, for how often I use them. All right, so the first lens we have here specifically is the 21mm from Thypoch. This is a great lens, and I actually use it as far as the amount of photos per wedding day is significant, mostly because I find 21mm is my favorite kind of like direct flash, party dancing focal length. For me, I think that one of the things I really like is the availability to stop this thing down to f8 and do all of my dance party, dance floor, direct flash kind of party look stuff, and then be able to just walk outside with this exact same kit, move this to f1.4 and get some kind of ambient scene setting things, and the availability to just let in a lot more light. And to be able to do this all on one lens is really, really nice. This lens is also super sharp, and I have zero issues with the image quality. I know that Gadgen recently made a video on the 21mm Summilux, but it's not a focal length I use for a lot of things where I need like the full Leica experience here. So for me, 21mm, f1.4 on the Thypoch, it does everything that I would ever want it to do at, I don't know, a tenth of the price or whatever. But if you are someone that uses 21mm a lot and you really want that look, save up for the Summilux. I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it is amazing, but it's just, for me, it's not like the lens that's on my camera all day. So it makes sense for me to own a much more inexpensive option. And so far I've had zero issues with the results either. All right, the second lens that I have in my kit is the 28mm Summicron. This is the lens I've had for probably 5-6 years now, and as kind of like another great like daily lens. I've used this a lot on the M6. I've used this obviously a lot on the M11 here. It was the lens that when I had two M10s, I was using a 28 and a 50 a lot, and having this combination with the 50mm Summilux that we're going to talk about in a second has been a really great little combo here. And I find the Summicron here is a great kind of balance between the much larger Summilux, and I always want at least f2 in these lenses because I'm often in really dark environments. And the size, the weight, the rendering, it's all really great for this. I then move from 28 millimeters to 35 millimeters. I just basically have every focal length from 28 up until 75 here. But my 35 millimeter is now the 35 millimeter Summilux. I've had this for a while now. But I remember early on, probably like 8 to 10 years ago, I borrowed this lens from Leica. They loaned it to me for a while. And I remember at the time just being like, I will own that lens someday. And it was actually in the silver as well. So it's kind of fun, a full circle moment for me, at least, that I now own this lens in the exact same configuration and the same colorway and everything like that. And this is the lens that if I'm going to just bring one lens and I'm going to shoot a bunch of just extra stuff at a wedding with this, but I'm not going to use the Leica for my primary everything camera. The 35 millimeter is just a great walk around lens. It's a great coverage lens. The 35 1.4 is sharp enough that it works good on a modern sensor for me, but even at 1.4, it has some really good character. I find that most of the time, actually, if I'm going to bring this and I can just have one lens on all day, it most likely be the 35 Summilux. Now, the 50 millimeter here, the 50 millimeter Summilux, I can't say enough good things about this lens. I made a video about it a long time ago, and you can check that out up here if you're interested in it. But I've probably made more photos on this lens than any other lens in the last decade or so of any camera, any system. I would say that this has probably seen the most amount of photos, the most photos in my portfolio. It is the brass version, and knowing that it is a small lens, but it's dense. But the rendering on this thing, the sharpness, everything is just like absolute perfection for me. I've considered changing this out to a non-brass version a ton of times because I think I would actually want to carry it around and use it more on a daily basis. But because I've shot so many of my favorite images of all time on this, it's going to be a hard sell for me to actually sell it. Never say never for sure, but if I do ever sell this thing, it will be a very, very sad day for me. And then the final lens is one that I don't use a ton, but it's one of those, if I'm just bringing like a really small kit and I want to maximize things a little bit, I will definitely bring this. It's the 75 millimeter f1.4 from Thypoch. It's the Samara. And while it's not a giant departure from 50 millimeters, it's enough that it gives you more separation. 1.4 is great on this thing. And if I need to, I can crop into the APS-C crop mode and get, I guess it would be like a 105, 110, something like that equivalent. Great little portrait lens. I also adapt this lens onto the Hasselblad and some other things. But it makes sense why I just would not spend the money because I don't use this focal length enough on the M system to justify me having the Leica version. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know which of these lenses was maybe surprising to you or what your thoughts are on third-party lenses in general on the Leica system. I'm also curious how many people make it to the end of these videos. So if you have, maybe leave a camera emoji in the comments so I know you made it. And if you want to see more of my Leica videos, you can check that out up here. Check out my most recent lens video up here, and I'll see you in one of those.